Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Sturbank, and this is my session, 5 quick ways to use material design to improve the UI UX of your solution. A little bit about me first. I've been a FileMaker guy for over 20 years. I started off with FileMaker 3.0 back in the day. I'm currently a senior solutions developer with the support group out of Massachusetts. And in my spare time, I'm a big nerd. I love the Star Wars stuff. I love the Marvel stuff. I love to play tabletop RPG games, especially Dungeons and Dragons. I was a D&D nerd before it was cool. Here's our overview of what we are going to do today. We're going to talk a little bit about what material design is, and then go through these 5 tips. I'll let you read them on how to quickly implement material design elements into your solution. So first off, what is material design? Material design is a design framework, a set of guidelines that Google created and for their own applications and solutions, and then gave away for free. It's a very well-researched, dense, deep resource that you can use to not only design your own solutions, but learn about design. And at this point, I'm going to jump out of my presentation, I hope, and jump over here to my browser and just kind of give you an introduction to material design. Now, material design has had 3 iterations. Their latest that just came out is this material 3. I haven't really explored it quite yet. The one that I'm most familiar with is 1 and 2. This is version 2 that we're looking at in the background here. And mostly I just want to give you an introduction to this site and say, go look around. They have lots of resources here, and will actually, if you read through it, it's a really good, just flat out introduction to design, much less material design as a framework. If you're looking for specific things, I would recommend going to the component section. And in here, you'll find very specific, rubber hits the road elements of how do I do a data table, or how do I do buttons or dialogues. You'll be able to find very specific guidelines on how to design those elements. So anyway, that is a very quick introduction into material design. And here are some links that will show you more information about them. 5 tips that we're going to talk about. The first one is going to be an 8-point grid. Now, you should be using a grid regardless of whether or not it's material design in your solution. It cleans things up. 8-point grid is one that aligns with many of the sizes that screens default to anyway, and has just been seen, why not a 6-point grid? Why not a 10-point grid? It's just has been seen to be sort of more pleasing and easier to work with overall. If you use one, there's better legibility, it's easier to add and remove objects, it's more consistent and scalable, etc. It's been used by graphic designers, user interface designers for years and years and years. Outside of material design just glommed onto that as well. And don't believe just me, there's a lot of resources out there about the 8-point grid. Here's some, just a few resources. Go read and see what they have to say. So how do you do an 8-point grid in FileMaker? Well, it's really, really very simple. Here I have the contacts solution, and in layout mode, all you have to do, it's already turned on here, but it's down here under snap to grid. These are the settings that you're going to want to do. So by default, FileMaker comes like this. These are the default settings in FileMaker. And what you're going to want to do is, in layout mode for your solutions, go to the positions tab, go show grid, snap grid, 64:8. And what this will do is give you a grid, you can already see it in the background, that has large grid lines at 64 points. That's important and helps to sort of divide up the screen. But the bigger point is these little boxes are 8x8. And then once you have that grid turned on, you just want to make sure that everything that you design is sized in a way that it will snap to that grid. And it'll make creating layouts almost like building Legos, because you're just snapping things together that are of a standard size. All right, that is our overview and our tip number one. On to the next tip. Our next tip is using the material design color palette. As a beginning designer, as a beginning FileMaker developer, I often found it challenging to pick the colors and to figure out which colors I should use as our main color, which color should I use as a highlight, there's a million colors out there. There's a million grays out there. There's a million blues out there. What should I use? Well, the material design color palette tools make that a little simpler. The two color tools that I tend to use is the material design color tool that material design itself has put together, and also a third-party tool called Material Palette. Let's explore those two really quickly. So if I come to my browser, wherever my browser is, there it is. I have them both up already. I'm going to start with the Material Palette tool here. And the thing that I like about this is that it makes picking colors really, really simple. What they've done here is create a tool that uses the colors that they recommended with Material Design 1, which was a very limited set of colors, which sounds bad, but I actually prefer. It makes making decisions easier. So what you do here is you first pick which dominant color you want to pick. So many people use blue. I'm going to pick indigo as my first dominant color. And then you pick another color that you think will go with that. So for me, I think yellow will go very nicely with that. You pick those two colors, you click twice, and this will generate a preview basically of what this looks like with these two colors picked as your main color and your highlight color. And you'll see it breaks it up. It gives you a demonstration what it looks like if this were designed in Material Design, and then gives you a palette that you can download. You can screenshot. I usually, when I do this, once I've decided on what I want, I will screenshot this and actually put it in my FileMaker solution. And it gives you the hex codes, this dark primary color, your primary color, a light primary color, what your text and icons should be, what your primary text should be, what your accent color is. It's all just, boom, very, very simple. You have 2 clicks and you have a color palette and you're done. Makes it really simple. If you want a little more complexity, you can use the color tool from Material Design itself. And what you can do here is it does a very, very similar thing, just giving you more options. So down here, you have your primary and secondary colors. And right now I have purple selected by default as my primary color. And then if I wanted to use, let's say orange as my secondary color, I would click over here, click on that orange, and it gives you a preview as well. This gives you way more options because it doesn't by default just kind of fill in all of the information for you. And it also gives you kind of a little more information about what the palette is, the Material Design palette. Again, instead of having all of the colors out there to choose from, they've broken it out into a series of steps for each color and also for gray. So you can come into here and use this to pick what colors. Okay, which blue do I want? Oh, no. It just allows you to very specifically say, oh, okay, though that's the main, secondary, and then there's a light and there's a dark. Gives you way more sort of guidance and options for picking colors. And that would be the Material Design color palette tip. On to the next tip. Our next tip is using Material Design icons. Material Design and Google, in their infinite wisdom and generosity, has created a whole host of icons that they've already designed and styled for just about every possible use you could imagine in your solution. So without too much further ado, here's the link to get there. And I'm going to go ahead and switch to my browser and show you how to use this. So here we are, fontsgoogle.com. The one thing to know is that it's a little weird that it's under the Google Fonts section of Google. But what you want to do when you land here by default, it will land you here under material symbols. You want to go to material icons. And then once you're in material icons, you can search by keyword, or you can just browse through this huge category of icons. You can also decide to change the styling of the icons from here. You can have them be filled, rounded, sharp, two-tone. I personally prefer the filled kind. And then once you're here, you just click on the one you want and select SVG over here on the right and download it. Now, here's a trick. This file will not work in FileMaker just on its own. You have to do a little editing, a tiny little bit of work to get it to work. But they're such nice icons, I don't mind. So I'm going to show this in my Finder, and then I'm going to open this up in my standard text editor. I use Sublime for that. And what you're going to want is to look for a section of this that has this fill equals none. This piece of the code you want to delete. If you delete that and then save it, now this file will work in FileMaker. If you leave that in there, it won't work in FileMaker. And much thanks to my good friend, Matt Stanford, for spending the time necessary to figure that out on his own and showing me that tip. So now that we've done that, come over here to FileMaker, open up a new icon. Notice I still have my grid on. So my icon is automatically going to be a nicely shaped size. I select icon over here. I'm going to hit plus right here. I'm going to find the one that I edited. I'm going to hit insert. Boom, there it is. And you can, size this, scale it. You can color it. It works with all the sort of normal icon features that you would normally have with FileMaker. That's it for this tip. Okay, for our next tip, tip number 4, material design text fields. I'm going to walk through really quickly how to create text fields in the material design style, and just kind of walk you through some of the basics. If you want a deep dive on the research behind a lot of the decisions they made and why they set them up in the way that they do, again, go to the material design website, go to the components section and find the text field section, and you'll find, usage, anatomy, behavior, all sorts of different craziness. They, in general, have 2 kinds of text fields that they have. They have filled, which kind of looks like this with a line at the bottom, and then they have outlined. I've found that the outlined version is easier to create and maintain in FileMaker, so this is the one that we're going to go with for today. Again, you want to do a deep dive on all this stuff, I would encourage you to jump in here and read through all this craziness. It's really interesting if you like that sort of thing. So I'm going to jump over to FileMaker, and you'll see here in my contacts demo file, I already have one last name field already created that looks very similar to our example here, right? That we have from material design. So let's break that down. So I'm going to go into layout mode. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab my first name just to have some elements. And now I'm going to show you how I'm going to restyle these. First, I'm going to change this. And if possible, if you can get away with it, the Roboto font is the material design font. If you can get your users to use that font wherever, it's good. If you can't, it will automatically substitute in Arial for most situations. So I'm going to use the Roboto font here. I'm going to set it to 16 point. I'm going to set this one to rubato as well. I'm going to leave it at 12 point. I'm going to size this up to the same size as I have there, which is, no, it's 40. So we're going to do this, and we're going to make this one 40 as well. And we're going to make this one 40. Obviously, you can do some tweaking to the sizes depending on how compact your layout is, but I'm going to go with these. I'm going to align them both to the left, and then I'm going to take the field and I'm going to format. I'm going to align that one center. I'm going to go over to my formatting. I'm going to do 0 and 0, but I'm going to leave the left and right at 8, which is going to give us our nice padding on the left and right. Again, some of these things we've tweaked. The official material design guidelines say you're supposed to put 16 points there, but I've found that that's feels like too much in FileMaker land. So for the label, I'm going to align the text to the bottom, and I'm going to give it a bottom padding of 4. And I really like to keep my labels and my fields the same size as much as I can, just because it makes it easier to sort of move them around and connect them just like Legos. So there we go. We've got our everything sized correctly. We've got our padding set up correctly for both of them. The next thing we're going to do on this is make sure that we have a corner radius of 4 on all of them, which is going to give us this nice rounded corner. And then we're going to actually give a left padding on this to 8. And that, does that it? I think that is pretty much it. Again, I went through that really quickly, but you'll be able to sort of slow down the video and go through those things step by step. But that is how you can then create this text label in FileMaker to look like it does with material design guidelines. That's it. On to the next tip. And for our last tip, the material design app bar. It's a pretty noticeable and common feature to use this app bar at the top of your solution's layout. It provides a handy place to organize various features, functions, icons, like navigations, like titles, and it sort of unifies the entire layout. So I'm going to show you how to do this in FileMaker, creating a basic list view. So let me go to FileMaker, and this is where lots of the things that we've talked about up until now sort of come together in one place. So before I go into FileMaker, I just want to show you that we're going to be creating a list view with an app bar at the top, and for that we're going to need 2 different components in material design. Not only the app bar section, which will show us a variety of component information about the app bar, but also something called data tables. And you'll see this obviously looks very much like a list view in FileMaker. The other thing I've done is created this palette and saved it so that I can get the different colors that I want. And also here in the icons, this menu icon is going to be what I'm going to want for the one button that I have in my list view. So going to FileMaker, you'll see I already have a sample of this created. And this is, again, the context demo file, very basic list view. We have an app bar at the top. We have a navigation button here. We have a title, and we have 2 fields on this list view, first name and last name. Very simple, but all very material design and easy to put together. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layout. I'm going to go call it MD list view demo, computer list finish. It's the minimalist, that's fine. And then I'm going to go back and we're going to make our top navigation be 160. We're going to make our footer 32, and I believe our body was 48. Yes. So we'll set that all up to begin with. And then the very first thing we're going to do is create that app bar shape, the rectangle. So I'm just going to create a shape right here, put it at the very top. And the first thing I want to do is the color, right? So then I have to come back to my material design color palette. I want my primary color here. So I just click on there. It copies that hex code to my clipboard, go back to FileMaker and come back to here, paste that in, boom, we're good to go. The other thing we're going to want to do is remove the outside. And one thing that material design likes to talk about a lot is elevation and the different elevation from top to bottom that different elements have. And they do, the way that they differentiate that is by using shadows. And for this one, for the app bar, if you come back to material design, you'll notice there's this nice little shadow at the bottom that says this is of a higher elevation than the subject below it. So to do that in FileMaker, we're going to go back to FileMaker somehow here, and we're going to give it an outer shadow. And I'm going to go back because I have this stored in my other one. Let's see here. What's the outer shadow that I have? It is 2, 30, and 2. So if I go back to my other layout, select that, go to my outer shadow, and go 2, 30, and 2. And that gives me a nice little shadow at the bottom that gives me some elevation there. So that's our shape. The next thing we're going to want to do is put that button at the top left. So I'm going to make this one be 48 and 48. Style it. We want no fill and we want no line. And then we want to go ahead and give it an icon. And it's this point where we would download that icon and change it like we did in the last section and then add it in here. I've already done all of that, so I'm just going to select it here. I'm going to do a 24 and close this and give it a button icon fill of white, and then bring it up in the top left corner there. Center it nicely. Very nice. And then, so that's 2 out of our 3 elements that we want for our app bar. We have our shape and we have our icon, our navigation button. So the other thing we're going to do with the shape here, just because I always like to do that, is to make sure that it extends all the way to the right with auto sizing. Last but not least, we're going to put in our title. And so let's try to do contacts. And we're going to make this Roboto. And we're going to make it 24 point. Do I have a 24 point? I do. And we're going to bring it up here. And we're going to make the color be white. And then we're going to make it the same size as this, because remember, I like having everything be of similar sizes because it makes it almost like Legos. So now it's the same height. Then I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to format, align it to center, and probably just make it a little bit bigger so that it's easier to move around. And then I'm going to move it over here and make it roughly 16 points between the two. We'll make it, give it a nice spacing there. And boom, there we have our app bar for this list view that we're putting together. All right, but then how do we put together our body, right? Well, all I have to do is go back and copy these guys. Remember when we made the text fields before? I'm just going to copy those text fields, bring it over into my list view, pop it in here, because again, everything's like Lego, so we should be able to change things around. Now this is a little too tall right now for a list view, so I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make this smaller as well, because I always like having these be exactly the same size. Bring it over so it's 16 points from the left. Again, making sure that everything is aligned to our grid. And then make sure that this is aligned with our body. It looks like, yep, we've got 8 points on top, 8 points below. That looks lovely. So now let's see what that looks like in list view. That's good so far. A couple things we're going to want to do. We're going to want to turn all of this off, because in list view, according to material design, you don't actually want the borders around the field in the data table. You just want the data itself. And then the other thing that you want to do is draw lines, and you want lines. If you'll notice the way I've got it set up here, I've got 2 lines. I've got one at the very bottom of the top navigation and another one at the bottom of the body. So let's go ahead and draw those from scratch as well. So we're going to take this and we're going to, again, because I like making everything exactly the same, it's going to do that and that, right? And then this is going to be where? It's going to be the bottom, so that's 160. So we want that at 160. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, no, that looks good, but I want, this is the one that's supposed to be at the bottom of the top navigation. There, that's what I want there. And then next thing we want to do is put this one at the bottom of the body. So what's at the bottom of our body? It's 208. So we're going to move this one down to 208, left of 0, and then probably just move it up just 1 pixel. And there we go. We have a really nice setup so that we can see which one we're on, and we've got these nice dividers. But the only final thing is that this black on these dividers is too sharp. If we go back to our color palette here, you'll see divider color is this gray. So I'm going to copy that, come back to FileMaker, select these guys, come back here, and change the divider color to that nice gray. And now go into browse mode. Oh, that looks lovely. Absolutely lovely. Now, last but not least, we want to add another field to our list view. Again, it's just like Legos. Oh, these guys are the same size. What am I going to do? Make them same size, click them, copy, paste, move it over here, give it a nice 8-point spacer. Just type in last here, select this as last, and boom, everything's aligned, everything looks good. And that is a material design list view, a list view in FileMaker according to the material design standards. Now, of course, there's lots to do within this space. You can make things slightly smaller or bigger, but as long as you are consistent, stick with the 8-point grid, stick with the color palette that you've been given, it should all look good. That would be the end of this tip or so. And that is my presentation. This has been just a very quick dive into using material design with FileMaker. Obviously, material design is a huge resource and you can spend lots and lots of time there. We barely scratched the surface of what you could actually do and use with their resources. I would encourage you to dive in there and feel free to reach out to me with any questions or thoughts or concerns you have. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me and have an amazing day.